Hi, everybody, and I want to welcome you back to the Maple Leaf Mystery Conference. And I'm just waiting for the panel to arrive. And as you can see, they're all starting to come. Um, and so welcome to the thrilling and chilling panel. We're very excited to have some very entertaining panelists with us today. Barbara Fracken, a friend of mine, I'm happy to say, and I know that the other authors will soon be friends of mine, that Barbara is going to lead the discussion today with our panel. We have about an hour. If you have questions for the panel, please put them in the please put them in the Q&A. If you put them in the chat, we might miss them. So please put them in the Q&A. I'll come back in a little later and check in once the questions start coming. And I'll also come back near the end to help close off the session. So welcome to the panelists. Welcome to Barbara, and over to you, Barbara, to take it over.
Thanks, Mike. This is a great conference, I have to say. You guys have done a fabulous job. And I've just spent the last delightful hour with Vicki Delaney and Mary Jane Maffini, both very good friends of mine. And it was like sitting in our living room together, listening to a chat, except the wine was missing. But other than that, fabulous and funny. But we're changing gears now because we're going dark. Now, for some reason, I've got Mar on my screen. I'm not sure why. Are we supposed to be, she's supposed to be on? Not that, oh, of course you are. I forgot you're on the panel, of course, but you're big. Let me see how, no, you're quite right. I was, but why am I getting, I need to have me, the person talking should be big. So that's kind of weird. Anyway, whatever. I hope that's not the case for everybody. So anyway, this panel is described as thrillers that send chills down your spine, suspense to keep you up all night, hard-boiled detectives, and tough city crime. But as you will see from our collection of panelists, that description is up for debate. To set the stage, I'm going to introduce each of the panelists individually with a short bio, and then I'm going to ask each of you right after your bio to give the famous elevator pitch about your book. For those of you who are not in the writing jargon world, that's the short time you have to pitch to the famous agent that you get into the elevator with in a New York hotel. And you've got roughly 2 sentences before they get off at their floor. And so you want to tell them about your book. So I'm going to start by introducing Linda Richards. Linda is from Vancouver. She's a journalist. She's done many different things and written many different kinds of things. She's the founder of January Magazine and the author of 15 thrillers, most of them with strong female characters and fast-paced, high-stakes plots. Her most recent is a new series about a hired hit woman struggling with personal loss and self-doubt. So Endings, I have these books somewhere. Let me get them. Endings was published in 2021. Get into the 21st century, Barbara. Has been optioned for a series, and its sequel, Exit Strategy, has just been released. So take it away, Linda. Where is she? Linda, is your mic on?
It appears that Linda may have gotten knocked off, Barbara. I'm not sure what happened, but I suggest you move on, and we'll work behind the scenes and resolve that.
Okay. Oh yes, I see what you mean. Right. Okay. So we'll move right ahead to Mar Preston, who's a good friend of mine. Mar is a dual Canadian-American citizen who spent much of her life in California before, but for some crazy reason, she returned to live in Canada a few years ago. She lives in Ottawa. She says she got into mystery writing late in life, but she has seven what she calls semi-hard-boiled police procedurals, mostly set in Santa Monica, where she lived and worked, and some in a Californian mountain village where she retired before moving to Canada. By Accident, that's that one, is her latest that she's going to talk about today. So take it away, Mar. Okay, what's happening to Mar? Mar, is she not hearing? Oh, turn your mic on.
Don't know what happened, but I didn't hear anything you said, and I got bounced off and reconnected.
Oh, okay.
So
I just gave
anyway,
you a, can you hear me now?
yes, I can, and I'll just go ahead and
Give me,
chat a bit. Well,
I told them your wonderful story, your bio. So now you can just tell us the elevator pitch for By Accident.
By Accident. Like all my books, it's set in Southern California, in Santa Monica, which is a tourist destination and attracts a lot of glitzy crime. And this one is my intrepid detective and his social justice warrior girlfriend going after a celebrity couple who have got off one too many times. And this time he's determined to get him. And it involves, like many, has a very media savvy, handsome brother who's a lawyer and is determined not to let this girl die as a Juana Doe. So things happen, it comes to an end, and I hope you'll take a look at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mar. Now, before I introduce the next one, I'm going to make sure that Shoshana CM Friedman can hear me and talk. Can you talk?
I am here and I can talk.
Good, good. So we'll get off on a better foot eventually. Okay, so Shoshana Friedman, SM Friedman, as she's known by her writing name, studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York and spent years as a private investigator on the not so mean streets of Vancouver before returning to her first love, writing. Her debut novel was published in 2015 to much acclaim. And the day she died, which is the one I think she's going to talk about today, and I don't have a copy of that one because I got it on my Kobo, is the latest of 4 books. It's a harrowing, standalone psychological thriller about shifting reality. So take it away with your elevator pitch, Shoshana.
I have a copy of The Day She Died, but I'm actually ready with my elevator pitch for Blood Atonement, because that's the one that's coming out in October. So that's where my brain is. So Blood Atonement coming out in October from Dundurn Press. It tells the story of Grace DeRoche, who, when other fundamentalist Mormon church escapees are killed, must determine if her alter personality is the perpetrator or if she's the next victim.
Awesome. So we're going to hear obviously more about that, but actually most of the things I was planning to ask you were about and the other one, but whatever, we can chat, we can go with the flow. Okay. Now, Caroline, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good, and you're on. Perfect. So our last panelist is Caroline Topjian, and I was very fortunate to have been at Noir in the Bar with Caroline in Toronto last month and heard her delightful reading from this book. She describes herself as a Gothic suspense writer. She spent part of her childhood in Ottawa, earned her PhD at York University in Toronto, and currently is a professor at Humber College. She lives in a 114-year-old haunted house in Toronto, as she describes it. Her debut novel, The Hitman's Daughter, another hitman, you'll notice, was, where am I? Oh, yes, was published earlier this year and is described by Library Journal as a fast-paced, haunting novel of survival. So take it away, Caroline.
Thank you. So The Hitman's Daughter is my debut Gothic suspense / mystery. And it's basically about, as the title suggests, the daughter of a hitman who the hitman's incarcerated, and Maeve Michael, who's the daughter, is trapped during a blizzard in a rundown Grand Hotel that's reputed to be haunted. And she ends up framed for the murder of the resident artist and has to rely on the survival skills that her father taught her in order to save herself. And she has to dig into the hotel's dark history and all of the elite guests who are there for New Year's Eve. And so it's a locked room mystery / ghost story.
Mm-hmm. Not your ordinary locked room mystery, though, that's for sure. Okay, so now I've read all 4 of these books and I've enjoyed them all thoroughly, but you can see how different they are. And none of them really fits this classic hard-boiled detective and tough city crime mold. So I wanted to ask all the panelists to chip in with whatever thoughts you have on this subject, no particular order. At its core, what makes a book a mystery, a thriller? And why does your book qualify? Who wants to start that one off? What do you think a thriller is? Mar, go for it.
I think you're on mute, Mar.
Oh, does she go on?
Rats. There. I heard Joy Fielding talk the other night, and I had thought that a thriller, a classic thriller, was high stakes. The villain was introduced right at the front, tick-tock, and it was a series of escalating chases and final capture that involves saving the entire world. Not so much. She defines it differently, and I like that. She has a thriller is something where there is larger than life stakes, but it's exciting. It simply means that there are big highs. There's Barbara's dogs or tollers. At any rate, you get the point. I'll let someone else take it from there. Barbara can go see the dog.
Somebody talk while I go see my dog.
In my mind, it's always been, unlike the mystery, which is sort of the who, we think of that as a whodunit. The core questions of a thriller for me have always been the how and the what. How is the protagonist going to get out of this mess? And what is it that's, coming at them, stalking them? That's the thrilling element. So that's, in my mind, how I distinguish at least those two, genres within that suspense umbrella.
I agree. I also think it's something, there's something with a thriller, no matter what kind of other categories it falls into, where there's just a build of tension throughout the story. And that's what I'm always aiming for when I'm trying to write something, is that the tension just keeps increasing. And for me, it's thrilling. So it's a thriller.
Have we completely lost Linda, by the way?
I think so.
We have lost Linda?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Mike, I'm not sure what we're going to do to try to get her back, but we'll just carry on with the 3 panelists we have for now and hope that she can get back in. Okay, yeah, so my books, I write 3 different series. one series is a clear, I'm just yakking about myself as a way of illustrating this point. One series is a clear police procedural series, but even that one has stakes towards the end, like it builds towards a thrilling conclusion. The capture, the reveal is not collecting in the library and chatting about evidence. It's a chase, and it's a high stakes kind of situation to be in. The other series, Amanda Doucette's, is more of an amateur sleuth, but not cozy. Adventure thriller type series, and it's more in line with, but there's still, I have a mystery at the basis of all my books. I think even thrillers have mysteries in them. Usually there's some bad that's happened, and somebody, the protagonist, is trying to unravel it and solve it and prevent more bad stuff from happening. I guess that's what it amounts to. However, you guys have done, you've stood thrillers on your head, on their head, basically, with the kind of writing that all these books are. But I wanted to comment. Mine is Linda, unfortunately, who has a very fascinating addition to this conversation. That the cliche is to think of thrillers as written by men. In the old days, that was what guys did. They wrote high stakes, big bang type stories. But all four of us and Linda are women. All of the people on this panel are women. And I don't think any of us have gone high stakes in the sense of international intrigue or gangs or bank heists or something that is going to be big, global, challenging. They're very intimate, these stories. So I wanted to know, do you think women write different thrillers than men, or write differently than men when they write thrillers?
That's an interesting question. I was thinking, as we've been talking about this, about several years ago, but in the before times, before the pandemic, I went to Thriller Fest, and one of the things I did was I spent a day in a craft fest session with Steve Berry, and he writes very kind of classic heisty type of thrillers, and he spent a lot of time talking about clean language and thrillers and how to keep building, and it was really interesting. But I kind of stepped back from it and said, I guess for me, the interest is in the psychology of something, and the mystery, once again, pulling in the mystery and the deeper emotions. I can't really speak for all women versus all men who write in these kind of this group of genres, but for me, a thriller without that that basis in psychology and in emotion wouldn't be half as exciting or interesting.
Yeah.
And we've also seen that sort of explosion of like the domestic psychological thriller, right? In the past, like when did it start? Go on the Train and all of that stuff, like, and it's still going strong. So I think that is definitely an area that was carved out, through women's voices writing thrillers. But yeah, I do think obviously there's a gray area, and it's hard to generalize, but I definitely see like, that classic unreliable narrator, domestic psychological thriller as a unique sort of subset of women thriller writers.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I enjoy them very much.
Pardon? What'd you say, Mark?
I said, I enjoy them very much. I just absorb them.
Yeah. And you interestingly, the other four of us, well, I have a male and a female in my two different series, but you're the one who's got a male protagonist, Mar. We're going to talk more about him later. But I still sense, do you feel that as a woman you were writing him differently as your male cop than a male cop dealing with that type of story would write, and a male writer would write it? I observed it. I don't know if you thought it. Are you there?
I'm thinking Mar might be frozen again.
Oh dear. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, well, anyway, we will just have to carry on. The thing I observed about Mar, are you unmuted again, Mar? She's gone now. Is that she delved more into the personal lives and feelings of the cops than I think they tend to, you know, cliched wise that they tend to be in male writers. I don't I don't tend to read a lot of pure thrillers, so I can't tell for sure, but and Linda's, she's got a tough hitman woman, but with a very very kind of fragile, damaged soul underneath. It's really interesting. Okay, so we'll carry on with the next question about this is that has to do with ideas. People always want to know two things from a writer. Where do your ideas come from? And what's your writing process? So I want to start with where the ideas come from. So Caroline and you, Shoshana, and Linda as well, you all have troubled young women as your main character. All the books delve deeply into the characters' thoughts and feelings, and there's a vivid, deep point of view that you've established. It, I would say, is the focal point of these books, that inner voice of those characters. So Shoshana, since you're the one that's grown up on stage here, everybody else has stayed small. I don't know how that happened, but anyway, tell us about Eve, your main character, and where she came from.
Yeah, I tend to write the things I fear. That's usually where my writing kind of starts, is something. I was a child who had like these horrible reoccurring nightmares and things that happen. And one of them actually ended up in the book, In the Day She Died, with Eve, where I used to have this reoccurring dream that I would go down into I was on like a chairlift seat, but it was going down instead of up, and it was down into like these pits of hell. Horrible dream. Anyway, that ended up in the book. But Eve, I think she was born from this overwhelming fear that you know, when you're supposed to be sleeping at night and instead you're twisting in circles, fearing things that, you know, in the daylight don't seem as bad. And I started thinking about death and what would happen, you know, what happens after you die and all of that. And then I started to think about, I created the character of Eve. What happens if you have this belief that you're going to pay for the things that you've done in your life after you die? And you've spent your entire life trying to hide from what you've done, the things that have happened to you, and the things that you've been a perpetrator in, the things that you've done. And that's kind of where Eve grew from, was this guilty conscience feeling of what would happen if you get to the end of your life and you have to start to face the things that you've been hiding from your whole life, the things that you did in your childhood that were horrible, the things that were done to you that were horrible, that you've spent your whole life trying to pretend didn't happen.
That's really interesting, spooky kind of a premise. So Eve herself as a character, is she based on anybody, or is she amalgam of some?
She's a bit of an amalgam, yes. The other characters in the story, like her grandmother, is really based on an amalgam of some older Jewish women grandmother types that I know. But Eve herself is, you know, obviously she's part me, she's part other people, she's part just herself. She just kind of becomes, I don't know, my characters always start off as me and then become somebody completely different down the line.
And the artist part, because Eve is an artist.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting way of her to express her feelings and explore her feelings, and to help draw the reader into that experience as well. Is that part of you as well?
That's my mom.
Oh, yeah.
My mom is an artist. So I I used my mom and her, she does she paints in oils, mainly landscapes. I used her techniques. I fished her brain for all the technical stuff. But it really is kind of a bit of an homage to my mom.
Oh, that's nice. I hope she liked that.
I think she did.
Okay, so Caroline,
Hmm.
Maeve,
Yeah.
quite the character. So tell us about Maeve and where did she come from?
Well, originally when I started, brainstorming the novel, I wanted to challenge myself to write a very likable female protagonist because I, previous to The Hitman's Daughter, had written quite a few unlikable, what are known as unlikable female, which, is another sort of, issue that we could delve into. But so I wanted to just make her nice, like, and at the same time, she's very much an outsider and a misfit, which I think is something that I'm always drawn to. I love sort of those misfit characters. So because she was raised by a hitman very unconventionally, they moved around a lot. She was homeschooled. So she was very much raised, in a sort of secluded, very, if you think, safe, ironically, environment. She was sheltered from life in many ways by her father. And that all just, that vulnerability, I wanted to juxtapose it with some kind of strength. So the fact that he's a hitman was the perfect opportunity because he's homeschooled her. So I was able to give her all of these skills and these survival skills that you could only really get from like that criminal, flip side. She's very well versed in, which made her a great amateur sleuth in this case. So that's the nice duality that I was trying to go for with her, to have her be very vulnerable and have her have this, she, in the end of the day, she wants a home. She wants to belong someplace. She doesn't have that. But if you come at her, she's going to know how to defend herself.
Yes, I thought that was really interesting that you had she knew all the tricks of the trade, stuff that you don't really learn in an ordinary, nice little middle-class family. Yes.
Yeah.
And she also had a wisecracky side to her in addition to that vulnerability because of that. Have we totally lost Mar?
Barbara, it's Mike again.
Mike.
We are having some technical issues. Mara is back, but
Okay.
I apparently her internet is a little shaky, which suggesting that Mara, you turn off your video. That might help. And we have lost Linda. But
Totally.
yes, Linda has lost her internet. It's on their end, so there's nothing we can do about that. And we can't help the dogs barking or anything else either. So, but I want to thank you for a fabulous conversation that you're having, and I just wanted to draw your attention to one of the chats from Joyce Wolcott, who said that Simon Woods says a thriller is something bad. Something bad is happening, and the hero has to prevent it. And a mystery is something bad happens, and the hero has to solve it. So if you look at the chat, I just wanted to mention that, and just to tell you about the technical issues. I'll be back with more questions later. Maybe you can comment on that, Barbara.
Thanks, Mike. And yes, that's the classic distinction between the thriller and the mystery. And so in my police procedural series, just to talk about myself for a minute, the cop stories always start with a body, or usually, because otherwise, why would the cop even be involved? And then it's a matter of unpeeling the onion, no matter what you do to the police procedural, it's about solving something that's already happened and getting to the truth. And the other one, in my amateur sleuth one, oftentimes the body, I think in my current one that I've just finished submitting to the editor, it's about page 100 before a body even shows up, because you do a lot of other setting up and a lot of other tension building things going on as you build the world that you're in before the body shows up. You have to motivate the the sleuth to be involved and to actually be enmeshed in the story and in the solving of the story, which you don't need to with a police officer. So, but they both have the same kind of thriller type of race to the finish. So I think sometimes that is tending to break down nowadays as more of us are trying to get our stories more exciting and page turny. I'm not sure that even something like Perry Mason would fly very well today with the courtroom scene of everybody. Oh,
No,
you're
I
back,
wouldn't
Mark.
miss it.
Let's see whether we can get you to talk. Can you talk?
Here
you hear
I am.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I noticed that all of the writing that I enjoy, the dark has become macabre. We're looking for more and more grisly ways to kill each other. And I'm turned off by some of the gore that I read. And in my cop series, my investigator that I now know so well, he's just enough off the cop stereotype that makes him interesting. And I leaven some of the police procedural stuff with his involvement with his social justice warrior girlfriend, who's leading an election throughout most of the series. Is that true? No, probably not. Sometimes you can't remember where you're laying up on your nightstand, and I wanted to show the cover of this one as well.
Yeah. Well, that's the one we're talking about. That's the one I've read.
And this is the one we're talking about the celebrities.
Yeah.
And I'm the person who gets in the longest line at the supermarket so I can catch up on the tabloids. And I don't know if anybody else is as interested in celebrity crime and the doings of it, but I suspect there are, because I've had some readers and commentary on that. But the darkness in the world we live in, is it any surprise that our reading material and what is processed in our brains comes out in such a macabre fashion? Of course not. You want to take it away, Barbara?
Yes. Well, I wanted to comment about your celebrities because I greatly enjoyed your police detective, he and his sidekick. Their names escape me at the moment, but that's my age, not because they weren't memorable. But what was, I think, the most standout type of pair of characters in the book were the celebrity couple. And I don't know whether that was on purpose, but that happens in a police procedural series sometimes, that the detective takes second stage to the drama that he's investigating, to the characters whose lives he's become enmeshed in. And this celebrity couple is off the charts as the craziest celebrity couple. But, having just tried to avoid learning anything about Johnny Depp and what's her name, Amber Heard, I realized that perhaps they aren't quite so off the charts, your characters. So I'm wondering, were they based on anybody real? Are you allowed to tell us? No.
Well, I lived in Southern California for many decades, in Los Angeles. And so I knew a number of people behind it. Really? And I amalgamated all those stories into those two people and their entourage. So I'm glad that it registered with you, Barbara. Yes, it's authentic. There are people like that.
Yeah. And that's the question that you were asking. You just partially answered the next question that had come to my mind as I was reading about them, which was your details about celebrity life and about the home they have and the neighborhood they live in and the security details that they hire and whatnot is so concrete and so detailed. I wondered if you had you ever been to one of these houses? Have you ever been in a situation where you would, or how did you research that? Did you hear me or did you lose me? Judging by,
Like that, no. That's
okay, can't tell you, can't hear you.
imagination.
I wonder if it would help.
Yes, I've been in homes.
Okay. This is, I'm wondering, Mara, would it help if you turned off your video and just talked? Just listen to us. I don't know if she can even hear me.
Yes, but
Okay, we'll have to move on. So I have questions for you guys about the writing process now, having covered the characters a bit. And how are we doing for time? Oh, good. Shoshana and Caroline, you both tell your story in a fragmented, non-linear way that switches back and forth in time. And it's a fascinating way to tell a story. It's interesting to read as well. Can you both talk about why you chose this story structure and how on earth did you plot it? What was your writing process in creating first draft?
Caroline, do you want to go first?
Sure. For me, because I was writing a Gothic, so the majority of the story is set in present day, and then there's a series of letters between two young women who one of them's at the hotel, and that's set in 1991. So that's sort of, kind of pulling on the Gothic tradition of the epistolatory, letters going back and forth. So that was sort of a point of inspiration, pulling on that very typical narrative structure of the Gothic novel. And when I was writing it, interestingly enough, there were a lot more letters, and I would toggle between, Maeve's point of view in present day, and then I would write a letter from 1991, and it would go back and forth and back and forth. And then I did some substantial developmental edits to try to make the structure and pacing even tighter and work even. So it was a lot of, for me, process-wise, like a jigsaw puzzle that you're just moving chapters around, consolidating a lot of those letters, again, to tighten pacing, because part of a Gothic thriller, or thriller in general, as we know, is that rising tension and that we talked about. So you just keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until you have the hopefully tightest possible plot structure. So that was my process. First draft was all back and forth, and then developmentally jigging it all to tighten it.
So did you have a sense of the complete flow of the letters, the whole story of the letters, and then you just chopped it up into bits to make individual letters? And similarly with the present day story, or do you kind of, are you a pantser more that you
I'm more of a pantser for sure. Yeah, I'm definitely more of a pantser. I find it's very difficult because when you're writing mysteries, any type of slash thrillers, there is sort of this pressure to plot, because you think, well, what happened, and you kind of have to work backwards from the crime, let's say, right? So that really lends itself to plotting versus pantsing. Nevertheless, for me, especially the letters, and one of the ways that I think gives letters more of that organic voice is to just let them flow and let them write themselves, if you will. So yeah, I pantsed them all, which is probably why I had substantial developmental edits at the end and I had to tighten it all.
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised at the number of us writers who are pantsers. It doesn't look like it when you produce the final draft, the final product. It looks perfectly tied together and well plotted. And so everybody else thinks we do that by careful outline. We don't. We just fly and then pull it together in multiple rewrites.
I'm
Shoshana.
one of them too.
Yes, yeah, I know. I heard you, Mar, this time. Good. Let's just carry on with Shoshana's comments on the same thing.
We relate to everything that Carolyn just said. It's very messy and very insane most of the time when I'm writing these stories. Like The Day She Died is back and forth in time. So it's present day from Eve having this accident that leaves her brain damaged and forgetting most of her past. And I switch back and forth chapter by chapter into her life as a child, her story in the past. And I enjoy doing that, but it takes a lot of playing, a lot of going in the wrong direction, and then, you know, finding out that, you know, this part just doesn't work anymore, and a ton of rewriting and editing and rewriting and editing. I just, you know, I'm not sure I will ever get to a point where I can sit down and say, and I do plot, but I'm very loosely plotting. Like I always have an idea of where I want to go, but by the time I actually get there, a lot of the times it's completely different. The story's just changed so much, or it's taken on its own life. And I also find I need to plot partway through. Usually, like, I get to kind of the messy middle, and then I'm like, I don't know what story I'm telling anymore. And I usually have to replot. And then even sometimes 3/4 of the way along, I have to replot again. Blood Atonement, which is multiple points of view and multiple timelines. I'm a little crazy, I suspect. But it's just the way my brain works when I'm telling a story. I don't know if I can manage to tell a story that's like chronological and makes sense and just follows along. Like, I've never done it. I just kind of go, I'm very scattered, and I go back and forth and here and there and everywhere, and to this person and then back in time. Blood Atonement has Grace's story when she was living in this fundamentalist Mormon church compound, which the Mormon church, the fundamentalist Mormon church, are the ones who still believe in plural marriage. And it's a very challenging place to grow up. And so she has that. So I go back and forth in time to those aspects of her growing up. And then I'm in the present timeline of her trying to figure out, you know, why these people are dying and how they're dying. And yeah, it takes so much putting it all together, cobbling it all together, having it make sense. The first draft is just a complete mess, usually, as is the second draft and the third.
Welcome to the world of a writer, right? Mark, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'd like to say something like about that, and just try putting. Okay, I attempted to discipline my unruly mind by doing NaNoWriMo this year. That's 50,000 words in a month, and I wanted to take a break from the mess that I was working on and try something completely new. And I managed to do an entire plot from beginning to end in that month. And I did do 50,000 words. So it's going to be my next project, and it's completely different. It's set in Northern Ontario in the Depression, on a farm family. Of course, there's crime, and there's less grisly crime than I have written about in the past. And I look forward to starting on it very soon, because I know where I'm going. Now, granted, I'm going to get to the same end, but the path may be torturous along the way. But I'm hoping to avoid the months and months of back and fill and fix it. And oh my gosh, You all know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
Next time it's going to be different, right?
Well, it's an interesting point you make, Mara. I have never tried to do that in NaNoWriMo, but that's a book in a month for those who haven't heard of that before. It's a very high pressure situation to write, and I couldn't imagine doing it. But I could see how, because I think what happens to a pantser, and that's me, is that once you get into the book pushes you along. It leads you along, and you just can keep going and going. If you didn't have to eat and walk the dog and feed people and stuff like that. When I was younger, I can't do that anymore. I crash, but I could write for hours, and the momentum is from being in that zone. And so you are pantsing, but you're writing. You can see the way ahead as you're going along. And so I think that's what you're talking about, Martin. That's what happens with that particular contest or whatever it's called. People get into it and just keep moving, because you don't have to stop and sleep, or if you do, you have in your mind what's coming next, because you've been totally in this world for that whole month.
NaNoWriMo is really great for pushing you to write something. I did it several years in a row, and when I was, earlier in my career with my first and second book, I did use NaNoWriMo as a tool to kind of keep me going. And then the third time I did it, I think I hadn't spent enough time sitting and plotting the story, and I just started putting words down, even though I didn't know, I hadn't given enough thought to what I actually wanted to say, what I wanted to, what story I wanted to tell. And I ended up wasting a lot of time and a lot of words. But I do think it's really handy for getting you out of that sitting and staring at a blank screen panic, or,
Mhm.
getting you out of your own way and just getting those words down. Whether they be good words or bad words, it gets the momentum going, and it can be really handy.
Right. And I have 1,000 more questions, but I just noticed we're getting down towards the end of our time. And I did want to ask a couple of funny questions. So we're going to change topics entirely. One of them is I want to play. You can't take the psychologist out of the person, even when they're retired. I want to delve into your past a little bit and ask, what influence or role did your family, your parents play in your becoming a writer? Was it an inspiration? Was it, oh my God, you'll never make a living, or somewhere in between, or what you want to do? What? I'm curious to know what your parents were like, and how they shaped you. Let's start with, you're smiling at me, Caroline, so go for it. Hopefully,
it's a good question. I haven't really I knew very early on that I wanted to write stories. From childhood, I always had an overactive imagination and liked to daydream and all of that stuff. So I think my parents were always very, being an introverted child who just liked to put her earphones on and listen to music and daydream. They, encouraged that. They encouraged me to be creative. I've always been in creative fields, so they were very supportive, but I wasn't actually in writing. So when I, what I pursued was actually visual arts, in university and all that stuff. So I remember had to take an elective within fine arts when I was in my second year of my undergraduate studies, and I took a creative writing course. I was like, this is it. This is, I had this passion, but I didn't really know how to turn it into a career or do it professionally. So I took this course, and the professor told me that I should stick to poetry because my prose was bad, and it crushed me, and I stopped writing, for many, many years. I was like, well, I can't write prose. And it wasn't until many, a decade plus later that I actually got back into prose and prose writing. So yeah, but my parents, back to your original, not to get too off topic, was they were great and they were supportive, and my father's not a hitman, so there was no inspiration that way.
No learning of the trade either. Okay, Shoshana.
Oh, what Carolyn said about that teacher, oh, that strikes me out, because I was already thinking, my parents were very supportive. Like Carolyn, I was the kid who I sat in my class and I paid absolutely no attention to anything that was going on, but I was very pleasant about it. So nobody would know until partway through the year when I was like failing all my tests. So my parents were always very supportive, but it made me think of this. I often think of this: one good teacher can make a difference, one bad teacher can make a difference in a child's life. And I was a terrible student because I paid no attention. And in the 7th grade, I had a teacher who I'd written a couple of, pretty terrible preteen poetry pieces, and a little short story. And for some reason, he just kept encouraging that and said, you've really got a knack for this. You got a great knack for words. You're a writer. And I took that at 12 and went, that's what I am. I'm a writer. And it took me a long time to kind of work my way back to that. I went into theater. I did that. I studied theater in New York, and then I came home and I was a private investigator for almost a decade. And then I eventually fell back into what my 12-year-old self knew, which was, oh, I'm a writer.
Huh, interesting. Mar, can you hear us? We don't have a lot of time, so I'm trying to, because there may be questions from the audience, but Mar, are you on? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't remember my parents being any of the subject of writing ever coming up, but they were great readers, and we were working class, and we would go to the library once a week and fill up the back seat. So that was a great influence on me. I learned as the years progressed, esteem in my early life to think that I could be a writer. It was unthinkable. And then I worked in research at the University of Southern California for many years, and everybody could write. It was like a kind of, well, so what skill. And it was only when my husband died 4 years after we moved to a strange new town that, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, I could always write a murder mystery. I love them. I've read thousands. And the first one was easy, but it got hard after a while. But my parents, no, they would have been flabbergasted to even know that I was thinking of such a thing, and I wasn't.
Yeah, interesting. Yes, the first novel, well, in my first novel took me 20 years to write, actually, but I had a few other things to do, like a full-time job and raise 3 kids. And so it was very much of a, what time have I got at 10 o'clock at night when the kids are in bed? And they got to bed later and later and later, and it didn't go so well. So anyway, we still don't have Linda, but perhaps we have time for a couple of questions. Mike, is there any questions that have come up on the screen?
Well, let me just say that Linda extends her apologies. Her connection was not good, and she wasn't able to get back in. So that's very disappointing, but she apologizes.
Well,
So
it's bad for her as well. She would have been a really interesting, fun addition too.
absolutely. So here's a great question. We only have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Do more thriller books become movies rather than regular mysteries? And which actress or actor would you see playing your main character if your book was turned into a movie?
All right, anybody want to
I
take?
have no idea. I don't know who the current crop of actors are.
No, us old timers don't know anybody who's under 50. You're quite right.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I mean, there's certainly in the BBC makes fabulous series mysteries. Of almost all of their top writers have crime mystery series made into television shows. but we don't tend to do that here in Canada. And I don't even know if the United States does. I mean, maybe Bosch, maybe I'm not even up to date on what might be in the US market, but certainly thrillers, because they can see the beginning and the end of it. They don't have to worry that they have to invest a whole year in something. That's my sense anyway. Does anybody know any great besides Cardinal and any Canadian mysteries that have been turned into series?
Well, I always think of Murdoch mysteries. I mean,
Oh, yes.
But those of us, I mean, we read Maureen Jennings. We know that Murdoch. I mean, she's great with the series. She helps to write the occasional episode and stuff.
Mhm.
It's been really fun, but it's nothing like her books. It's become its own thing, which is fine.
Yeah. Somebody just said that Sam Weeb's
was about to say Sam.
Wakeland series had just been picked up. So
Yes, they get picked up, but as Vicky Delaney mentioned last time, they often don't make it to the finish line. It's just
Mhm.
the way it is. So good luck to them. Congrats on this first step.
So I'm gonna try another question. Do you always have writer thoughts in your ordinary day activities? Do you see story ideas continuously, or can you shut down your train of thought when you're doing regular routine chores?
I feel like my brain is always half in a story when I'm in writing mode. I feel like I'm kind of I'm trying to navigate day-to-day life things, but it's like there's just a little part of me that's just not quite there. I'm off in, my own little world, which isn't always helpful when you're trying to deal with other humans. But
yeah, I think I'm similar. I'm always unconsciously, if not consciously, just reflexively harvesting things from what's going on around me that provide inspiration for words and for stories.
Yeah, I like to think that we're storytellers, and that's kind of the way we see the world. So anything that comes up, we spot it. Any funny little thing, a little snippet in the news, or a argument in a coffee shop, or a strangely dressed person on the bus, and we're spinning a little story about that. Who is this person? What's this argument about? What happened before? What's going to happen next? And they just sit in your brain. And you might use them, you might never use them. When I'm in full writing mode, it's with me all the time. I take my Inspector Green on walks, dog walks. He's there while I'm emptying the dishwasher. He's there while I'm stuck in traffic, wrestling with plot issues or wrestling with things that aren't working. It's just who you are.
That's the life of a writer. So, so
Yeah.
we're getting close to the end. It's probably time to do a closing round. If you have a suggestion around that, Barbara, we have about a minute and a half left. So I'll leave it to you and then I'll close off.
Yes, and somebody's just commented in the chat that Louise Penny's books, there was one turned into a book, a film here, and now her series is being developed in the UK. And Kathy Ace's series is maybe in the same boat as Sam Weave's, I don't know. If we have a minute, I
Just
want.
have 1 minute and we're going to have to close.
Okay, then I don't have time for this fun last question. Okay.
No.
Okay. I'll be
So-
good.
So it's because we have other panels coming.
Yeah,
So I want to thank you all for coming today. It's been fabulous. I'm sorry we didn't have more time. I'm sorry we didn't have everybody we wanted. I'm sure Linda is very disappointed, but you guys did a great job. Thank you, Barbara, for moderating. Thank you, Carolyn, Shoshana, Mer. Thank you, Linda, wherever you are in the universe.